Welcome back to Get a Grip on Lighting. On today's show, we are proud to be joined by Kathryn Toth. She is an award-winning architectural and landscape lighting designer who creates artistic lighting solutions. Her projects include interior and exterior, landscape, retail, commercial, and residential projects around the world. Working to develop the visual atmosphere enhance the space is her specialty. Kathryn is an active and instrumental member of the Illuminating Engineering Society, the IES, the recommended practice for landscape lighting, the IES Outdoor Nighttime Environments Committee 1. She's part of DarkSky International and the International Landscape Lighting Institute. She was also a guest on episode 68 of Restoring Darkness. But before we get to Kathryn, we got to go back to Satco. We've been talking about Satco a lot today, Greg Eric.
We have been, but they should be talked about a lot because they have everything you need, including decorative lighting, which we're going to talk about today. As lighting distributors, we don't get into it as much as a lighting designer, but you can get into it and you can sell it. And Satco with their Nuvo line has some of the easiest product to sell. Socket a lot of times, which I think we're going to talk about today. Medium-based socket, so it makes it easy, so it's flexible, and then all sorts of designs, colors, shapes, flavors, and available in stock.
And affordable. And they Satco always lets you make a little buck when you sell their stuff. Actually, so they're a fun arrow to have in your quiver. Nouveau at Satco satco.com. The Gangsters of New York, and of course, proud members of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, like you and I, Greg. They've been in longer than you and I have been in the association.
They have been, I think, probably since it started or right around then. So
Yeah, for sure.
thank you,
And
Satco.
and so if you have light bulbs or light fixtures in a warehouse and you sell them over a counter, whether you sell them to lighting distributors, that would make you a vendor of Nailed. If you sell them to the general public or to commercial properties or whatever, then that would make you a member of Nailed. So there's vendors and members. And of course, we have a big event coming up, the show of all shows, the greatest show on earth, the Nailed Convention, Greg.
Right, September 22 to 24, Minnesota.
Minnesota, right in Greg's backyard. See you then. Kathryn, welcome to Get a Grip on Lighting.
Thank you for having me.
So, Nailed and distributors talk a lot about light sources, light bulbs, ballast, components, all that kind of thing. And we don't hear designers talking about light sources, light bulbs. They usually speak in terms of lumens, but one of the things I see on the show notes right off the bat is decorative lamping options, Greg Eric, using medium or candelabra based lamps. Can you describe what you mean by that? Because that gets us lighting distributors excited because we love selling light bulbs.
Of course you do. I actually was recommending a Satco lamp to my client this morning for a hotel because it one of the lamps that they had. I was really excited about it. It's an A19 basic lamp, but it looks like a traditional incandescent lamp. And because of that, it has more distribution. It doesn't have that funny plastic line that will create shadows on your decorative fixtures or in the lampshade. If you have a floor lamp or table lamp, there's typically a lampshade. And if you use like what are more standard LED lamps that are on and I'm sorry, I always say lamps, not light bulbs. And I
They're
know that
lamps.
the
They're
school,
lamps. They're lamps.
they're lamps. So thank you. So the lamps that I'm always specifying and I'm worried about that line that the plastic base will sometimes cause, that shadow line that'll happen. And I try to avoid that on my projects. And so I like to recommend lamps that are, full distribution, look as clean as possible. And it depends, on the light, on decorative that we're working with. Do we want to see the filament? Do we want it to be diffused? It really just depends on where we're recommending what we'd be looking for. But I do like to use medium base and candelabra base sockets for any of these light sources that you're in decorative fixtures. It makes it a lot easier. And I work primarily in California right now. That code is kind of changing a little bit in the future. But for the most part, we can really limit how much wattage is used and still get a good quality of light with the new LED sources that are out in the market. So I recommend them. But you always want to tech them. And the biggest deal for me is always dimming. And I don't care what you're doing with what fixture you're talking about. If you aren't dimming it, then you're probably going to have too much light. So, and you never want your decorative to be the only light source in a room. You want it to be able to dim down. So it gives that nice warm ambiance and that decorative kind of vibe that you're looking for. And other light sources can be the workhorses in the area if you needed the walls to be lit or something like that.
Now,
Those are
I want to
my
get
tips.
more. Yeah, no, that's great. I want to get into that, the lamping options, but I do want to go back to what we first said. Lamp or light bulbs? I used to always say lamps. Now, when LEDs came, I say light bulbs. What's the right? I know it's lamps, right? What is it,
I
Mike?
just
What do you say?
no, it's still lamps in my world. Sorry, but I'm old school, so maybe that's my
Yeah,
problem. But and I tell my clients, and sometimes I'll say, hey, anytime I say lamp, I mean light bulb,
yeah.
and I'll like because I'll be talking about it, and I can't revert to like a new vocabulary as easily or as quickly sometimes, and it just depends on the client, and I try to read the room, try to slow down.
So what we're talking about, those that have not got into those that are in the LED only era, in the past, a lamp was not a table lamp. That was the table lamp was the fixture. It should be called a light fixture or a table fixture or something like that. The lamp is actually the light source you would put inside. And what's super interesting is the most beautiful, and says antique fixtures here on the show notes, the prep notes here as well, and I want to talk about those in a minute. But the most beautiful light fixtures were made to surround light sources. They weren't intrinsic to the light source. And I think where LED has maybe gone the wrong way is that everybody's forgotten that it's nice when light fixtures look nice, actually. And LED fixtures are really ugly, actually. Most purpose-built outdoor post-top fixtures. I'm just starting to see now some really nice designs. And there are some good ones out there, but I'm talking of the majority of the light fixtures. Nobody's thinking of the aesthetics. And Omni is not true Omni, Greg. When I see Omni on a spec sheet for a light bulb, I know that it's not Omni. You have to look and see. I know exactly what Kathryn is talking about. And then right to repair. I mean, Kathryn, if she's using lamps, is giving all those clients the wonderful right to repair their lighting systems for so many reasons. It's such a good choice. Kathryn, tell me a little bit about antique fixtures. Are you restoring antique fixtures? Are you using them? What are you doing with them?
Okay, so there's a lot. It depends on the project, it depends on the client, it depends on the interior designer if you're working with one, and really on those kind of antique fixtures. You're looking for where it's coming from. Can you get it to the United States of America easily? And there's increased fees for all of that. If it's local, then that's easier. But you still have to usually send it to a UL or ETL listing house to get it scrubbed up and kind of rewired, typically, just to make sure it's safe and it's not a fire hazard. And that's what I always recommend for any of the projects that I'm working on. And typically I'm working on projects where we're importing them from Europe and they were some old school something and we're kind of converting it to work here. And it's just usually extra expense, and making sure your client is comfortable with that and aware of the time that it takes for customs and that UL or ETL listing house to buff everything up and put a label of approval on it. So,
What's the most interesting antique fixture you worked on?
oh gosh, that's really hard. There was one for I do a lot of high end retail, but one of the ones that I remember for Urban Outfitters was really cool. It was like a lot of tubes, and I've seen since then, and this was quite a few years back, it was at least 15 years ago, and a lot of kind of similar fixtures have come out on the market, but had these crazy tubes in it, and we put some fluorescent. It was before LEDs were really mainstream on the market, so we put some fluorescents in there, and we had to really kind of renovate it to make it really look right and aesthetically pleasing. But it was really fun. Yeah, but yeah, the other ones are just common. They're like more chandeliers, and that's fun too. It's just a little bit more basic, so
Sure.
not as challenging.
It's interesting because there's a guy in Toronto here, and he makes like antique lanterns for churches and stuff like that. But he also repairs fixtures. And right now, currently, he's got a warehouse full of gas lights from the PEI legislature that he's
Oh,
converting into LED fixtures, but going to create the exact same effect as gaslight, the same color
cool.
and stuff like that. It's not gonna flicker like a fire, but it's gonna be the same Kelvin temperature, and it's a super fascinating project. So it's time to bring back. I want to talk a little bit more about antique stuff. Do you see a movement in lighting design and that side? Because in our side, from the distribution side, we see small towns wanting to keep their old lanterns that are 50, 60, 70 years old and retrofit them to LED instead of replacing them. And we're seeing that more as a project kind of end of it. Can you make this into LED for us? We really want to keep it. From your end, do you see clients asking for, something old in their design, something that, that's a light fixture that's coming from somewhere else and then the room's going to be designed around? Or what's happening on the design side with that?
It just depends on the client and the aesthetics of the space. I have a very old home that I work on. I've worked on for years in Los Angeles, where the aesthetics work for a more antique aesthetic in general, because they want it to look appropriate and age appropriate for the house. But I have these really modern, chic spaces that are renovations and full, like new spaces, and even if they're renovations off of the 60s, a 1960s style home, it's still so much more modern. We aren't using a lot of antiques. So it just depends on the project. I remember working on some decorative custom fixtures that were going to the Bahamas. And so one thing that you always want to pay attention to is the finishes. And we had those fixtures finished with a clear lacquer to make sure they were protected from the corrosive environment. And also had some hurricane structural like supports in there so they wouldn't get tossed about in the hurricane and be damaged beyond repair or gone.
Yeah.
It's a hurricane, so it's always nice whenever it's still there, whenever you're out of the storm. But so those are the kind of things that I would kind of pay attention to and make sure that you're aware of, because it's really project and location in the world specific. Be mindful of where this is going to live for the next 20 or 40 years, and really make sure that you're right, choosing the right sources. Some light bulbs, I can be taught, or lamps, as we've been saying, are not rated for enclosed fixtures,
Mm-hmm.
or rated for exterior use or damp location or anything like that. So those are the things that you want to pay attention to, because otherwise you're just going to be replacing that stuff constantly because it just can't cope.
Well, you might be wrecking an antique fixture because it corrodes in the socket or something like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I can see it right now. There's a hurricane. The whole building's gone. The wall, but the fixture's still there, Greg.
Still lasts.
So what are you doing on the controllability side? So are you incorporating lighting controls into your designs? Are you a light switch and dimmer on the wall kind of person, or do you prefer to go maybe something higher end, with a app based kind of thing? Where are you at with that, Kathryn?
Oh, I'm very, very much in the whole home control, the whole. It doesn't matter if I'm working on a residence or a store or an apartment building with a lot of common areas. Everything has to be like a central system where we have control of all the lighting and we can dim them to different levels. And if it's some kind of space like a hotel, I'm making sure that they have a 24/7 pre-programmed scene where it is astronomically timed. So, an hour before sunset, it changes to the evening scene on a slow fade. And then at 11 p.m., it'll change to a low fade to, the nighttime scene. And then in the morning, it'll have a brighter level, and the same for the daytime scenes. But always a slow fade for those areas, especially if they're sales related. You never want to change the light level in a restaurant or in a space where they're selling anything very quickly. Because the first thing people do is they look at their watch and they say, oh my goodness, what time is it? Oh my goodness, I have to hurry up. Or they look at their email or they check their text message and they're distracted from the sale. So you always want to keep them in the space as comfortable as possible. And you never want to drastically change that. On the residential side, I absolutely always advocate for a home control system. Even if it's some kind of simple, wireless control where the switches are hidden somewhere else and there are buttons that are, connected to those switches that are hidden in a closet somewhere. There are so many sophisticated ways and apps that you can use to make sure that you have control over your lighting. And that's what we're really looking for. You want to have that dim capacity to dim everything to nice lower settings and create those scenes for your clients.
So you mentioned the decorative fixture. You like to do a screw-in socket, whether it's candelabra or medium base. Are you having issues finding that? Do you find enough manufacturers doing that? And then also, Are people starting to come back with it? Because I know for a while, some manufacturers said we're not doing that anymore. Everything's purpose built, and I've seen some come back. So what are you seeing?
Well, it's the gamut. You have all the options are on the market right now, and while that's good, as long as the LED that's integral to the decorative fixture is diffused, and you're not seeing diodes, then I'm okay with it. And it has to be dimmable. And sometimes and I think I find this a lot with a lot of European manufacturers where the capacity to dim or that compatibility is not there. Like they only speak in dolly, or the driver that they're working with or the power supply that they're using is only going to work with DMX or something that's really not typical for a residence, or more expensive for us to install here in the United States. So I really like to pay attention to that and make sure that we're aware and that we're coordinating that so that you can still dim things. And sometimes that takes a lot of extra legwork. It's not just something that is easy or quickly happens, because they're in Europe, the time zone change and getting answers sometimes just takes a while. So there's that limitation. But in general, finding decorative fixtures that do not show the diodes directly through whatever lensing is still a huge issue. So it might photo great, so their cut sheet will look fantastic, or their catalog will look nice, or their photoshopped pictures of it will look great. But then you might see it in person and you might be like, oh my gosh, there's diodes everywhere. And, that is not what we're ever looking for. I'm perfectly comfortable as long as we can get confirmation that there's no diode visibility. I don't mind integral LEDs. I just know that in the past, it's been more affordable for a lot of decorative fixtures, especially in the hotels and the hospitality market that I'm working in. That sometimes is much more affordable to go with a lamp and a meeting base or a candelabra base socket, rather than having integral LEDs. It just depends on what you're doing, if it's custom or if it's not custom, or what options we have.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I kind of like the more modern looking fixtures from a personal preference. And I see on your profile here that you are heavy in landscape lighting. I actually did pole lights down my driveway, Mike, and I wanted to get them with a nice screw and base socket, and have them
How
dark
dare
sky
you
compliant.
dark sky
I know, but
polluter.
I was going to make a little bollard looking thing, and I did it. I was able to get it done with but I did an LED fixture that actually had the dimmable LED component in it, and it looks great, it works great, and I highly recommend it. So it can be done with that.
It can be done. When we're thinking about lamps and light bulbs with clients, have any of your clients asked you on the hotel or the commercial side, more so I'm concerned, but even the homeowner side, when you're in a hotel, you have 24/7 operation in the corridors. You have varying uses in the hotel rooms. And so at some point, they're going to need to change those light fixtures. Do you ever hear anything about maintenance when you're doing design, like what happens when something fails? And you just say, look, this is a candelabra-based socket, buy the new light bulb. Or do you not encounter that in your design practice?
I always am talking about that with the client at the beginning of the project. So it's part of the design process. It's not some surprise. It's not some shocker at the end of the project or 2 years after it's been operational and occupied. I know I always want to talk to them. That's why I made the recommendation this morning for the lamp that I sent over to my client who's working on the hotel. And I reminded them that, hey, for maintenance, we really want to keep this list of light sources as small as possible for any medium-based sockets that you've got. I really was recommending that they only have one source for the entire hotel, because if there's no reason not to, as long as the source fits and everything, and there's no reason we can't use an A19. If we had to switch to like an A15 just to be consistent, then so be it. But that wasn't the case in this scenario. So I always talk to them about that, and I'm always conscious of the fact that failures could happen, but we want to make sure that there's a game plan for that maintenance and for working through things.
Wow, this looks like it's the Satco show today, Greg? Holy mackerel! We're talking about all the products they sell.
Yeah.
And, so you can go to satco.com right now, folks, if you want to check out all the stuff they have. They're fantastic supplier, all sorts of great fixtures and that. Kathryn, do you have any final thoughts for the distributors, contractors, designers, regulators, accreditation, all the different kinds of people that listen to Get a Grip on Lighting? What are your final thoughts for them?
I would just recommend that everybody does their best to try to educate their clients. You, as a lighting professional, know way more than they do, and you can help them make better decisions. So try to go out there and advocate for some dark sky products or some dimming capacity that they weren't originally thinking about, just to improve their project and the quality of light for the entire life of the project. I think they'll really appreciate that feedback if it's phrased the correct way, and I highly recommend that everybody tries to do that with all their clients.
Awesome. So go to satco.com, Greg Eric. I'm going to go there right now because I got to check something out. And of course, be in September. Where are you going to be, Greg? Where are you going to be?
I'll be here. You're going to be here too. St. Paul, Minnesota, September 22 to 24. Nailed.
Beautiful St. Paul. Of course, you've got light bulbs in a warehouse. This is your association. Join us. We're making moves. Kathryn, thank you for being a guest on Get a Grip on Lighting.